Welcome to Roland Chidiac Connects, the podcast where I get to talk to people about their motivation and inspiration. And I have to say that I'm super pumped for this one because I get to talk with Jaime Casap about his motivation and inspiration and the work he does. Welcome to the podcast, Jaime.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, no problem. It's a real pleasure to be able to take some of your time. I know how busy you are. I follow you on Twitter and Facebook, so I get to read about your adventures and see lots of pictures. And like I said, I know you're really busy, so I do appreciate your time.
No, this is a great excuse not to have to go work out today. So I thank you.
Okay, well, I'll take that as a compliment. So usually at the beginning of the podcast, I usually tell people how I know the guests that I'm speaking to. So I've interviewed some guests that I've never met before face-to-face, but I have to say that in this situation, I am quite pleased to say that I have met you face-to-face. So let me just give a little bit of history. A few years ago, you were doing a keynote at a conference in Niagara Falls called the ECHO Conference, Educational Computing Organization of Ontario. And I was there to enjoy the conference, but I missed your keynote because of my fatherly duties. So I get there and everybody's like, Roland, you missed Jaime Casap. And I said, so what? And then they go ahead and start telling me about the types of things you spoke about. And then over time, I learned a little bit about who you were and your talks and what you're about. And then, but then I get into the Google Teacher Academy and I get to go out to Mountain View at Google HQ. And they didn't tell us what was going to be happening. So I'm there and you walk in the room and I'm like, holy cow, that's Jaime Casap, like right in front of me. So I'm talking to some of the people I'm sitting with and they didn't know who you were. And I said, well, get ready, because if he's talking to us, he's going to tell us about like his narrative, what's brought him here, and kind of what we can do to move on. It's going to be a great pep talk. And they're like, yeah, okay. And so then I'm like, well, I got to go say hello. So I go up to you and I introduce myself. I get a picture with you, which was pretty cool. And then you did your talk. And when you were done, the colleagues that I had just met were blown away. They were like, man, you were right. That was awesome. So thanks for talking to me, and thanks for inspiring me and a bunch of other people a couple of years ago at Google headquarters.
Thanks. No, I try to make it to as many of those Google Teacher Academies as I can. It's not always easy for me because I'm not there. If I was there, I'd be at all of them. But not being able to be there, they're always on my calendar, and I try to make many as I can. So I'm glad that.
That's awesome. So, Jaime, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I actually just celebrated my 10th year at Google. I've been at Google for 10 years, and for most of those 10 years, I've been in the education space. Accident. I was part of the team that launched Google Apps for Education in the university space because I was looking for a project to work on with ASU. We had just opened up an office in Phoenix. I got hired by the CIO at Google to come work on a bunch of projects for him. And one of those projects was go find a project to go work on with ASU. And Google Apps was the thing that came out of the bunch of meetings that I had with ASU. So I fell into this a little bit by accident. I always wanted to be in the topic for me, and we can discuss why, but that's how I started. And since then, my job is to basically continue to support the team as they're working with universities and K-12 and superintendents and other education leaders to provide them support so that when there are events or someone needs a subject matter expert, I support the team. So that's part of my job is we have a sales team, if you will. They're more like consultants because they don't actually, they're not making commissions on Google Apps for Education because it's free, but they are working with superintendent others, and they rely on me to bring in some subject matter expertise. They rely on me to kind of support the work that they're doing, and so I do that. That's the big part of my job. And then the second part of my job is to focus on the education space and to think about and to talk about and have conversations about what's going on in education and what's the role that technology plays in education. And I get the chance to travel around the world doing that kind of work. I just got back from Detroit, where there was a college access conference, and I got a chance to go talk to 1,100 people about what's happening with technology in education, about what's happening with this new generation of kids who are in our school, and how those two things work together so that we can create new learning for our students. Every once in a while, I realize I get a pay stub, and I forget that they pay me to do this. So I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Right, and I can tell from your social media posts and the pictures that you're posting often about the work that you're doing that you do seem to really enjoy it. And from my perspective, the part that really like attracts me to your story and the work that you do is what kind of got you to where you are today. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience, as a child growing up in New York, and kind of what that looked like with respect to your education?
Yeah, so a lot of people have heard me speak. I always start with this idea because I think we need a common denominator for everyone in the room. And always, and this was what's, the passion that you find in education, the common denominator is that we all think education is important, and that we all believe that education can disrupt poverty, and we all believe that education is a silver bullet. Like, we believe these things. That's why we're sitting in the room together. That's why we get into the education space. And for me, it's a personal mission. It's a personal journey because I'm one of those kids that we often talk about, the ones that we really need to reach, right? I am a first-generation American. My mother had come to America from Argentina, escaping poverty, escaping government oppression in the late 60s in South America, looking for a better life, like millions of immigrants before her and millions of immigrants after her. And I was born in New York City and raised on social services. I grew on welfare. I grew up on assistance. I grew up in a rent-controlled apartment. I had all these kind of social programs to help my mother get to the point where she can actually have her own 2 or 3 jobs eventually, what she did. But so education's what got me to where I am today. And I believe that it is a silver bullet. I believe that it is what disrupts poverty. I believe that that the American dream is if you work hard, you get your education, you can accomplish anything. Now, there are a lot of things that we need to do in that space, but education is that root, the center to doing all the things that we want to do. So that's where my passion comes from education. I didn't have your traditional kind of journey that most people at Google have or other companies have, but I tell students all the time, students who are growing up the way I grew up, I say to them, if you can make it out of here, if you can work hard, if you can get your education, you're going to have a competitive advantage because you're going to have a different point of view. You're going to have a different perspective, and that perspective is going to be very marketable in the marketplace. So work hard, get out there, and take advantage of the different perspective that you have.
So as a child with all those barriers in front of you, what motivated you? School, what inspired you? Because you and I both know a lot of people who, I didn't grow up like that, but my connection to what you're saying my mom and my dad came from Lebanon in 1975 with nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
And as I was growing up, my father was all over me about education, and I was by far not a good student.
Mm-hmm.
I only turned it on in high school when I realized, my time's coming to an end. I need to do something with my life. That's what woke me up. But my whole life, my father would say, you must get educated. This is what's going to lead you to success in life, because he
Right.
didn't have that. And he came here. So for me, my motivation kicked in later on. But what motivated you? What inspired you to work really hard, even with all those barriers in your way?
Yeah, I think that I didn't necessarily have that parental support, but I think what it was for me was two things. Number one was, it's that interview question of, what do you want to be doing in 5 years, right? My answer in my head all the time was, I don't want to be dead and I don't want to be poor. That was my motivation, right? Not to be there. Much violence, and I saw so many people ruin their lives, and crack cocaine had just come into the neighborhood in the early 1980s, and I saw people who were living normal lives turn into absolute with the drug situation. I fear, if anything, the motivation. And then the other side of that, because I think it's never one thing, it's a couple of things. On the other side of that was a motivation of stubbornness, right? This idea that I would look at stats that said that, who went to Pearson high school, or, that only 13% of Latinos have a master's degree, or 5%. I always felt like that was a challenge. I always felt like, oh yeah, I'm going to prove that wrong. I'm always trying to prove myself, if you will, right? And sometimes I guess I'm in trouble, but that's where the motivation came from. It was more about, the fear of not being, of being poor, the fear of, ending up like lots of my friends that ended up being dead or in jail. And this idea that, because of the lot in life that you had this kind of end road that no matter what you did, you were going to end up there. And I didn't believe that. And it was always something that I fought.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us, because I think, I don't know how much of that comes out in your talks. I've seen some of your talks on YouTube and stuff, and you do talk about, oh, okay. And well, I appreciate it. I think it's important for people to hear, because sometimes students like you and I we just get left behind. And so for me to hear that, you were motivated, by fear and by that stubbornness, it's really served you well, because now you're at a point where you are influencing people en masse, and you take it very seriously.
Yeah, and I think that I actually I just wrote an article for Forbes that is in the process of being edited, and the whole point was of the article was that I'm not anything special. There are millions of Jamies in our communities, in our inner cities, all over the country, and I wrote this article to point out some of the things that you just said, which is that many of us don't have that traditional kind of education flow, or don't have that traditional workflow. But it's not because we don't wanted to, because it's because we didn't know, right? We didn't know that. I didn't know I could go to Harvard. I didn't know I could go to Stanford. I didn't know that I could do a summer internship in Singapore. I didn't have any of those things. You live and that's the thing that you take. And so I wrote this article. I'm in the middle of writing this article about that idea that there are millions of kids like me that, if we want to look for the hidden talent pool that's out there, we have to revamp and rethink how we recruit. We have to rethink, how it is that we examine resumes, and how it is that we look at cover letters, and the mistakes that we look for, and, those diamonds in the rough, if you will. And there's lots and lots of kids who are growing up like that. And we need to do a better job on the business side to reach out to those students to kind of bridge that gap between where we think they should be and where they are, understanding that with some good professional development and some good resources, we can get them to where we think they need to be.
Yeah, it really sounds like you want to disrupt the system in a way to kind of look past the traditional processes in order to offer students like the best possible path that they can be on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that it's one of those ideas that, like I said, when I talk to students who are growing up the way I grew up, I say to them, look, you're going to have competitive advantage, because I tell them that usually in the room, in the meeting, I have a unique perspective because of the way I grew up, because of my background. And they're going to have that unique perspective, that unique background, if they can work hard enough to get there. I also tell them, this is something else that students don't get to hear a lot, is to be proud of who they are, right? To be proud of their background and what they've accomplished and what they've overcome. A lot of people who are growing up, who grew up in poverty, tend to hide that. And I myself, I hid it for a long time, because it's this thing that we do as a society, is that we tend to equate poverty with low ability, right? If you're poor, you must not be smart. you must not work hard, right? And so a lot of people who are growing up in poverty see what they overcame. You don't get to hear the stories because they would rather not talk about that background or talk about those accomplishments.
So Jamie, okay, so you're motivated, you're stubborn, you get through school. How do you end up at Google? Like, what brings you to Google?
Yeah, so so I have a master's in public policy, and I've always wanted to disrupt policy, and I actually went back to New York to work for Governor Cuomo, the late Governor Cuomo, the brilliant late Governor Cuomo, back in the '90s, and I spent 2 years working on welfare reform, if you can believe it, working on a team that was focused on care, social services, the governor's office, this cross-functional team that was looking at doing welfare reform in a completely different way that actually got results. And so I got a taste for policy. I got a taste for doing that kind of work in that space. So I've always been attracted to that kind of work. And then I went to Accenture. I was lucky enough to get a job at Accenture, and I worked in a consulting space, and I worked in electronics and high tech. And so I worked for companies like Seagate Technology and Motorola and Sun Microsystems and all these other companies during my 7 years at Accenture. So I got involved in the high tech world. Ended up at Charles Schwab, again, another opportunity that was in front of me from a former client that I had at Accenture. And then while I was at Charles Schwab, Google announced that they were opening up an office in Phoenix, and I got a call from the CIO the day they announced the opening, saying, "Hey, my name is Douglas Merrill. We're starting an office here in Phoenix. Would love to talk to you about this opportunity." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely, of course." And then found out that he got my name through someone he knew at Charles Schwab, who was an SVP there. And it's always about the opportunity work. So I was recruited to work at Google, to be part of his team, to open up the Phoenix office and to work on various projects that he was interested in. And that's how I got in. So I talk to students all the time about this idea that, you don't try to plan out your life perfectly. Look at an opportunity, think about what you can get from that opportunity, how you can grow and the value that you can add, right? And that'll lead to the next thing and then the next thing. And the most important thing that you can have is your reputation, because that'll follow you everywhere. And that used to be true before social media and before the ability to search for people and search for today, your reputation means everything to you.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating story. It truly does speak to working hard and being open, like you said, to the opportunities that come your way. And it really sounded like you, after university, you went after your passion. Like, you said you went back to New York to work, and you were doing something that was kind of unrelated to what you're doing now, but in a way, it's led you to where you are today. And you're right about having background provide you with a different point of view when you're speaking to people, or working with the people you're working with at Google. You really do have a different perspective because of the path that your life has been on. So again, I appreciate you sharing all of that with us. It's kind of like it's the foundation of who you are and how you've gotten to where you are. And that's basically the premise of this podcast, is to really hear people's stories and to hear kind of what's gotten them to where they are. Because I think people will forget or won't pay attention to all the things that had to happen to you in order to lead you, and the influence that you have on educators today. So, like, I'm blown away that I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you, and I'm taking notes, and I'm like, is this really happening? Am I really talking to Jamie? So my hope is that when we're finished, that I don't lose this audio, because Murphy's Law. I'll have the best podcast ever, and then it'll go away. So my fingers are crossed as we're talking.
Right.
I wanna shift gears, and I wanna take you to the White House, because that's another, in my opinion, that's another cool story of you being asked to participate in something to, again, motivate students and get people like really pumped about what they're going to do or what they want to do. So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done at the White House recently?
Yeah, so I don't even remember how it came up, but I was contacted by the First Lady's office about an event that they were holding at the White House last year. And the First Lady has done a tremendous job focusing on education, focusing not just on education as a thing, but really focusing around equity and access and talking to students about why they need to continue their education. So one of her initiatives was called Reach Higher. And it's still a program, but the whole idea is that it's not even about graduating from high school, it's about reaching higher than graduating from high school. And so they were having an event at the White House called Beat the Odds, and somehow my name came up and they invited me to come speak at the White House. And of course, you say yes. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had no idea what the but I as nervous as I was, 10 times more nervous when I actually showed up. I just did it. Like I said, I was just in Detroit talking, and I don't even get, I don't get nervous before I speak. I actually enjoy it. I look forward to it. If anything, I get anxious because I get excited to do it. But I was, like, maybe I can pretend like I just passed out so they won't make me speak kind of nervous. But walking into the East Wing of the White House experience, as someone who's, and like most of us have seen the White House on TV and have seen the inside of the White House, or even, seen the West Wing, which was my favorite show of all time. You have an idea of what the White House looks like. And so you walk into this thing and you feel like you're on a movie set. You feel like you are in a different time period. And notice, to the East Wing of the White House, in the hallway, the presidential portraits of Kennedy, of Reagan, of Clinton. And you're just like, in your head, you're thinking, those can't be real. Like, that's not real. And they totally are. And so this event was happening. I learned, because I hadn't had a chance to think about where this was happening. Then this event had happened, was taking place in the East Room of the White House. So this is that room that everyone knows. I didn't even know it's called the East Room until I got there. But George Washington portrait on the side. You've seen it a million times on television, and that's where this event was happening. And I was the only speaker. I was the only individual speaker. They set up a podium for me and everything. Everything else was a panel. I also ran a student panel, but I was an individual speaker, and I was going first. And so everyone's sitting there. Everyone is, in their Sunday best, and they're escorting me into the green room of the White House. And I tell this story in my presentations about how I was standing there and looking out of the window of inside the White House. Like that alone, like just the ability to look out of the window from inside the White House and see like the tourists on the road taking pictures, and you see the Washington and the sorry about that, and the water fountains, and there. I was, it was a surreal experience when they finally opened the doors and I walked into the East Room of the White House, and it's all bright and it's all lit up, and it's just unbelievable experience. And you walk up to the podium, and I looked out into the audience, and I saw the cameras in the back, and the doors of the back of the room were open, and I noticed the red carpet. And I had walked on that red carpet all morning, back and forth in between rooms. But it was the first time that I noticed that that's where that red carpet is, where the president comes out and says, we killed bin Laden, and then disappears, right? Like, and I'm standing there going, I'm inside the television set. So this surreal experience, and I remember what I talked about, because it took me a while to write the 10-minute talk, but it was focused on those kids. At the end of the day, you take out the White House, you take out everything else. It was what I wanted to do was connect with those kids, those 150 kids that were there, and say to them that, I am I get to speak in the White House, and I get to stand here, and it's a surreal experience, but I am no different than you are. I know exactly where you are. I know exactly what you're going through. I know exactly what you're capable of, and I am just like you. And if I can do this, you can do this, right? And so that's what motivated me during that experience, during the day and the experience. I honestly, I don't remember very much of it. And then I had I met the president again, and then I had a 5-minute conversation with the First Lady, and I can't tell you what we talked about. Like 5 minutes. I have no idea what we talked about. I wish I recorded it, because the whole time I'm standing there going, I'm talking to the first lady. I'm talking to the first lady. I'm talking to the first lady. And her lips are moving and I see her talking, but I have no idea what she's saying. I think I might have just like nodded a couple of times and that was it. But it was a surreal experience.
It's a lot of fun for me to hear the excitement in your voice as you talk about that. And I think that people who listen to the podcast will agree. It's cool to hear somebody talk about an experience that they've had that's very exciting to them. And I really enjoy the excitement that you experienced, but then when it was time to do your business and to deliver your message to the students, nothing else mattered. And so it's a kind of like a yin and a yang type of thing where you're in this place that is like, I'm Canadian, so the White House. The White House is a big deal to me because of just
Sure.
of the symbol, right? The power that it holds. But at the same time, I think here you are, this American boy who's come from poverty or whatever, is now in the most important place in the United States of America, and so you're soaking all that in. But then at the same time, you've got to get up and you've got to open up and let everything back out.
Yeah.
So cool for me to listen to you talk about it because it's like any American's dream, I would guess, is to get to hang out at the White House and you got to talk to the president and the first lady. Like those are some pretty powerful experiences that you can tell your kids about one day when you decide to do so. I know you've got some older children, so you probably shared the experience with them, but I'm thinking of your daughter who's quite young. One day you'll be able to show her those pictures and to talk to her about that. So I just think it's a really rich experience. And again, I appreciate you sharing that with us. As somebody, from the outside looking in, I saw your pictures and I remember seeing these portraits on the wall thinking, holy cow, like he's literally standing in front of these things that you see on TV all the time. And I was thinking the same thing. This can't be real. Like,
Right.
you always see it on TV. But anyway, so yeah, just exciting to hear from the First Lady's office. Probably a real honor for you to get to do that based on your background. But I also, I hear you come back to the same message over and over again, that when you talk to these kids, these students, you tell them, and the article you're writing for Forbes, about that there are many people just like you can do what you've done. And I think that's powerful I'll give you two examples. It's powerful for the kids that are trying to work their way out of that they would rather not be in. But it's also, I've heard from educators who have grown up in a more traditional setting, that your message makes them more aware of the fact that there are kids in front of them every day who are experiencing what you experienced, and the importance of being open to all their students in order to lead them all to success, and not just the ones that come to school with a full belly and a lunch bag full of food.
Right.
So I've heard from both sides of the fence that your message about education and the use of technology in the internet to assist with learning is reaching people no matter where they come from or how they've grown up.
Yeah, so that's why to me it's the most exciting time in education because I'm not on the education bandwagons are terrible. I spoke in the White House. I have nothing to complain about when it comes to my education system. The whole point is that it has that capability. It has that potential. And so we need to take advantage of that potential. And that's really the key message there. So I think that what we need and why things are exciting is because we're finally at the point where we can start looking at technology and looking not even just at technology, but at new learning models and all the great research about what good learning looks like that we can start implementing and taking advantage of. So that's what's exciting to me about what's happening in the education space.
I'm going to touch on something that I didn't ask you if we could talk about it. So if you're not comfortable with it, I'll cut it right out. So very, in my opinion, very outspoken about who you are and the life you're living. And I know with the political stuff happening in the United States and being a minority. You do speak out a lot about your experience, person, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Does that ever come up when you're talking to kids? I say kids, I mean students and teachers, people who are listening to you. Does that ever come up? Do people ever say anything to you about that, about race and equity and all those things? Or no, it's just you're talking about education?
Yeah, no, I think it does come up. And I made a decision a long time ago to be me. So 24 hours a day, it's me. I am no different talking to you than I am when we are done here and I go talk to my kids or talk to my wife or talk at work. I am the same person. And so I think it's important to be, I don't even say to be authentic, but to just be who you are. And if you have a strong point of view, or if you have a good argument against something, that you should have a good argument and have the facts and have your point of view. Also, to be open to how are you ever going to change your mind? How are you ever going to understand things from a different perspective if the people you're talking to don't know your perspective, right? Don't have your point of view. And so I'm pretty open when it comes to my views about things because of my experiences. So for example, I think that being a person of color in this country, sometimes puts you at a disadvantage. It's okay to say that. It's okay to bring that out. I'm not going to hide that. And I'm sure it's impacted me in my life. Maybe times when I didn't even know it impacted me. So I my kids are strong people because I think that's something that I helped them kind of develop, which is this idea of identity, an idea of who they are, and to not only respect who they are, but to be proud of who they are and to be proud of their viewpoints and their perspective on things, with the understanding, again, that they're open to changing their mind, that they're open to listening, right? I talk about collaboration a lot and this idea that we want to build collaboration skills, but in reality, we don't do that in education. We don't do it well, because real collaboration is the ability to listen and to change your mind, right? One of the things that we look for at Google is, one of the main, characteristics that we hire for is leadership. And I think most people would recognize that when I say looking for leadership, what we're not saying is, can you tell people what to do and that they'll just follow you blindly, right? And we're looking for leadership in the context of, can you, be influential? Can you present strong evidence and data? Can you ask, can you ask for consensus? If you don't believe in something but everyone else does, can you follow a consensus? Can you build that kind of influential model of real leadership? Because that's what we need more than anything, is real collaboration skills. And I think, we end up being in an you against me world, when reality is we can have a good debate and have a good discussion, presenting facts and data and asking good questions, and your mind. It's okay to, hey, you just turn me around and see it from your perspective, to have a point of view, to have a perspective.
Points about collaboration and the ability to teach people that true collaboration involves listening, and being leaders in that respect. That's huge, because a lot of people talk about collaboration, of changing your mind doesn't come up. It's almost like we're going to collaborate because it's the right thing to do, but at the end of the day, I still want my ideas to be higher, at a higher level than the rest of yours. So you raise a good point about that. And it's funny because I'm a teacher, grade 4 or 5 teacher, and I'm thinking I can't wait to get back in the classroom tomorrow and talk to my kids about what collaboration is, because they sit in groups and I expect them to do things together, and I expect them to solve problems together. I expect them to get really messy with their learning together when they need to. But I don't think I've ever mentioned anything about changing minds. And I think it's important to honor that and to share that with them. Also, for going down the road of talking to me about you being you, and that it's important for everybody to express who they are and to be open to changing their mind. I think that you rode in a really nice way, and I really appreciate that. And like I said, I didn't share that with you, but times to meet with you and talk with you. Like I said, I read your Facebook posts and stuff, and I thought, I wonder, if Jamie would be open to kind of talking about who he is and some of the struggles or challenges he has as a non-white person. So I appreciate that very much. Coming to the end of the podcast, and this is the part at the end where I give my guests something that I call the final word. And the final word is about imagining that people come up to you at an event or a conference after you've spoken or even before you've spoken, and they share their story with you. And they say to you, you know what, Jamie, I hear your message and I just don't feel motivated. I don't feel inspired. Not because of you, but just in general in their line of work.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to somebody that just flat out says to you, you know what, Jamie, I don't know what my motivation is. I don't know where to find it. What would you say to somebody like that?
Right. And so it's interesting because that kind of leads to one of the things that I get quoted for a lot, which is this idea that stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up and instead ask the problem they want to solve. And the reason I'm afraid, a lot of us in education do what we do because we're passionate about it, right? We're in it because it's purposeful. There's something for us to do, something that we can grab onto. And for a lot of people, that's not true. Here in the United States, 70% of workers are unengaged with the work that they do or disengaged with the work that they do. And I think a lot of that has to do with they're not meeting their purpose. They're not, fulfilling what they're interested in. And so I think it's important to, when we talk to students or talk to anyone, is to think about two things. One is, what is it that motivates us as human beings? And my, Daniel Pink will talk about, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. That motivates all of us as human beings. And so how do we get as close to that magic triangle as we can? And I think when you ask a kid what problem they want to solve, you're basically getting there. You're saying, what's your purpose? And then how do you want to solve that problem? And then the third part of that is, what do you need to learn to solve that problem? And so it fits really nicely with that model of what motivation is. And so I think we all seek that. I think it's a human nature to want to seek purpose, to want to seek autonomy and do it the way you want to do it, and develop the skills and get better at whatever it is that you do. And so, I talk to people all the time. This is not something that just happens with students. I have lots of friends and lots of people in my network, who come to me, I hate what I'm doing. I don't want to do this anymore. What is it that I'm supposed to do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And it's framing those questions. And I probably need to do a better job creating kind of a handbook, if you will, for adults. But it's basically what is it that drives you? What is your passion? What is your purpose? What's the problem that you want to solve? And I often hear, we ask students or we ask each other, just do what you love. And I'm not a big fan of that framework either, because I love to sit on a couch and watch football games, right? And I don't think that there's very many jobs for me to do that. So doing what you love isn't necessarily in line with, finding your purpose. I think if you find your purpose, you will end up loving the work that you do, no matter how hard it is, because sometimes the work isn't lovable, right? It isn't easy to do. There's lots of things that you see. I struggle with, I struggle with their full potential. So that's not something I love, but it's necessary to get to the purpose part of the work that you do. So that's part one. And the second part is, we talk about this, I get this question all the time, which is how do you deal with resistance? How do you deal with resistance to change? How do you deal with people who don't want to change or don't want to do things differently? And I've come to the conclusion that I don't actually believe in resistance to change. And what I mean by that is, I actually believe that people are resistant to pain, but they're not resistant to change. Here's my exaggerated analogy, which is that I travel a lot. I've traveled 150,000 miles this year. I just crossed 1 million miles of flying for the last, 15 or 16 years. I've traveled for a very long time, and I've been traveling for 20 years in the same way that I've been traveling forever. Like, I know what time to leave for the airport. I know what I need. I know what my bag looks like. I know what line to pick. I know what I need to take off so I can go through the metal detector. I have a process down, right? I have my work down. And if Google comes to me and says, you know what, so I think what we're going to plan at the airport to take you wherever you need to go, do you think I'd be resistant to that change? I think I'd be okay with that change. I think I'd be okay with changing the way I travel if they put a private plane in front of me. Now, if Google said, look, you're traveling too much, so from now on you got to travel on Greyhound and take buses everywhere, I think I'd be resistant to that change. So it's not the change that it's what the change is that you're resistant to. And so what we need to do is get people closer to the private plane than to the Greyhound bus. And so a lot of what presents to people sometimes is, this is going to be painful, and this is going to be terrible, and this is going to be, you're going to have to do things in a different way, as opposed to being positive about it, which is, this is going to bring you purpose. This is going to make your life better. This is going to bring you that joy and that happiness you're looking for. And together, I'm here to support you to get through that. We need to get people on that road, because at the end of the day, there are many, many people who are resistant to change, but there's a whole lot more that are looking for that guidance, who are looking for that drive, who are looking for an opportunity to better whatever it is that they do, because we're all natural problem solvers. That's what we are. We're problem solvers. That's what we're born to do. We're born to solve problems. And so I watch, trying to solve problems every day. And that's how we are. That's how we're built. And so we need to get closer to that model so that we're constantly learning and constantly growing and constantly trying to solve problems in different ways. And that's, to me, the most important thing that we can give people.
Great. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's also a selfish endeavor. So it's nice that I can take some of the wisdom that you've imparted on us and roll it into my practice, because that's the purpose. The purpose is to have this available to people, to hear about how other people have become motivated, and what people like you have to say about helping people find their motivation or their inspiration. And I benefit 100% because I'm the one that's speaking to the guests. I'm the one who's collecting this information, so that I can stay motivated, and so that I can offer something to someone if they ever come to me and say, hey, you know what, Roland, I'm not motivated. I can just say, hey, I've got hours of podcasts for you to listen to, and when you're done, you'll be pretty pumped, and you'll go out there and you'll do all kinds of amazing things. So
Right.
Thank you for adding to that. It has been a real pleasure. I enjoy all my podcasts, but this one's kind of neat for me because I've gotten to meet you. I've missed one of your big talks at a major conference in Ontario, so this is like redemption for me. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I'm getting it all back. So thank you for your time. I look forward to following you and to learning more from the work that you're doing, the great work and the inspiration that you're providing educators with. So I hope that you have an enjoyable evening, because I know you're 3 hours behind me, so you still have some time over there. I'm running out of time.
Right.
I gotta hit the sack soon, but you still have time, so you can go and. I guess
Yeah.
This is it for your evening. You can have some free time now.
This is my free time now. Yes.
Right on. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.